Hello, my name is Olivia Steele, and I will be presenting on Chapter 10 of our textbook, which is the chapter of cinema technology. Through this presentation, I hope to take you through the technological innovations that made cinema possible, the development of cinema as an art form and as a technological medium, and then the recent development we've seen in the past few years of cinema technology. So we first need to start with the background of cinema, and this first years of cinema are often referred to as the silent era because from the late 17th century all the way up to the 1920s, there was no sound or color in films. So that is often what it's referred to. On slide 3, you'll see that we have a few inventions that paved the way for cinema. Cinema was not invented all in and of itself all at once. There were steps that we had to take to get to cinema. Some of those things include photography, roll film, and the camera. A first milestone we have in the cinema road is the zoopraxiscope created by Muybridge in 1878. And he invented this device, and it used what is called persistence of vision, which is when an image appearing in front of the eye lingers for a split second in the retina after the image has been removed. And this allows for a smooth, realistic motion of the pictures for the viewer. Maury came along and he invented the chronophotographic gun in 1882. This used series photography to take pictures of birds in flight. And then we finally have Goodwin and Eastman. Goodwin invented celluloid roll film as a base for light-sensitive emulsions, and Eastman mass-produced this celluloid roll film. Edison came along, and he decided to combine these three inventions to create something that could record motion pictures. And so on the fourth slide, you'll see W.K.L. Dixon, who was a research assistant at Edison Laboratories, took these innovations of Edison's to the next level, and he invented the first authentic motion picture camera, which we call the kinetograph, in 1890. From this invention, Edison decided to create Nickelodeons, which on slide 5 you'll see that these were arcades where people would pay a nickel and they could enjoy through the kinetoscope a peep show, they called it. These shows were often shots of real life, people walking down the street, out of a factory, someone at a market buying something. They were very simple shots of everyday life. And the Lumiere brothers, after viewing through a kinetoscope one of these shows, decided to invent the cinematograph, which projected a film on screen for an audience of paying customers. This invention was important because it synchronized the shutter movement of the camera with the movement of the photographic film strip, which allowed for a mass audience to view films instead of an individual person. On the next slide, you'll see that from this invention of the Lumiere brothers, the art of cinematography was born, and these people I have listed on the slide really were influential in evolving this art form. We had people start to edit the films and create storytelling in a modern narrative form. So cinema became less of something in which you watched a person doing something of everyday life and more a story you would enjoy with a storyline of a beginning and a climax and an end. And it became a business, a profitable business. And so in that, you started to see a rise of studios in which people had studios where films were created. And during this time, this period, 5 major studios emerged, and these 5 studios had a vertical integration of the film industry. They created every single part of the films, and they owned every single part of filmmaking and the cinema business. And you see the rise of Hollywood as well. When these studios rose, Hollywood also became a mecca of filmmaking. And this was because the conducive weather for filming in Southern California allowed these filmmakers to make larger scenes and more elaborate scenes for their films. And so it evolved into this specialized industry that was taking place in Hollywood among these 5 major studios. And this kind of led us into the modern era, which you'll see on slide 8 is this era where we get the advent of sound, color, and spectacle in our films. So first off, slide 9, you'll see that Warner Brothers, one of the major studios, released The Jazz Singer in 1927. And this film synchronized dialogue and music with the film, which was a huge innovation. All of a sudden, you no longer had to have a live orchestra in your theater to accompany your silent film. You could put sound with your film. You could put actors saying dialogue with your film. Shortly after that, in 1932, a process created by the company Technicolor allowed films to go from black and white to color. You also saw advances in cinema technology and systems. Slide 10, you'll see some of these advances, such as the widescreen revolution. People started experimenting with 3D in their films and getting very creative with those kind of effects. The studio monopolies that I mentioned before were disbanded, and independent filmmakers began to rise. Cinema was less of a money-making medium to them and more of a way to express their story and their voice for many people. So these independent filmmakers still had studios and still used many of the visual production things that were common in cinema, but it was no longer a complete vertical integration. There were many other parties involved in making films. Theaters were also no longer a single screen theater. They began to be multi-screen theaters. So there was just an explosion of cinema technology throughout this. And a large part of that was the development of visual effects. So 3 different types of visual effects. There's mechanical effects, optical effects, and computer-generated imagery. And all throughout this period I've been talking about, we had visual effects here and there and people experimenting with visual effects, but 1977 was really a benchmark year for visual effects, and that was the year that the first Star Wars was released. And this is considered a film that revolutionized visual effects in the industry. When you talk to filmmakers, there's often in their mind the before visual effects, and then there's the after visual effects, and it's this movie Star Wars that kind of marks that in their mind. And after Star Wars, you had other movies such as Tron and Toy Story, which was the first all CGI animated film. Avatar was another huge film that marked an important development in visual effects. The Lord of the Rings trilogy, a little before Avatar, was also another one in which visual effects really shown in that film as a way to tell a story in a much more effective way. And that kind of transitioned us into the digital age. And this is a transition from using film to make these movies to using digital material. You'll see the quote on slide 12 that says, "It would thus appear that the changeover from film to digital is inevitable. More than 80% of theaters in the US use digital projectors and digital playback systems exclusively." This is not to say that film is obsolete or that it has completely disappeared from the movie-making process. However, it has become more of a hassle to use film, and digital is much more appealing to many, many filmmakers. So I think in the future we'll see a continuing rise of digital over film. This textbook was written in 2016, so I thought it would be interesting to sort of take a look at trends and advances we've seen in cinema since then in the past couple years. So on slide 14, you'll see that I've listed the top ranked movies for 2017 and 2018. 2017, it was Star Wars: The Last Jedi, and 2018, although we're only a few months in, it's been Black Panther. So I'm sure we'll see other movies moving up that list as we go farther in the year. Some trends to watch in the future on chapter 15, or slide 15, you'll see that we've seen the Movie Pass kind of come into play, which has been referred to as the Netflix for movie theaters, and it's kind of brought back going to the movies with people, and that's kind of something to do now. There's a surge pricing kick where movie theaters are considering pricing tickets differently depending on the time and on the day. So on a weekend during the evening, tickets would be more versus during a weekday in the afternoon they'd be less. There's also still a struggle to remain profitable in what's been called the golden age of television, where you have Netflix and Hulu that are so popular now, and just television shows in general, they're really the norm right now. And all the articles you read question how theaters can remain profitable in a time where there seems to be a declining interest in them when it comes to choosing them over television. Television is on the uprise, and movie theaters' profitability, they seem to be on the downtrend. And that is where my question for you comes in your opinion, will cinema continue to be a declining form of technology? Why or why not? And what are some things that could possibly revive this medium form, giving it an edge over television? Thank you for watching this presentation. I hope that you've enjoyed it and you found it informative.